first conversation for today. We're joined by representative of the Belize Police Department, the commander for community-oriented policing. We have with us Gerald, Assistant Superintendent of Police, Gerald Jones. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, we were starting the conversation in terms of looking at safety in Belize, and typically around this time of year, there are particular issues that you would warn residents about, whether it's protection of life or protection of property. There are things we can do to be proactive about it. But let's talk about Easter coming up and the current context, the tension that we see within the city. What is your advice to Belizeans at this point in time?
Well, thank you very much for having me again this morning on the talk show. When it comes to the tension within the city, and of course the Easter holidays that is upon us, we want to ask residents to be more cautious of what they're doing. We have seen certain things happen last week. So there's seriously some tensions here and there, but nothing to that extent that you cannot go out and have fun. But you have to be responsible when having fun. For example, we want to look at safety measures in terms of swimming. It might be something that is not really serious, but it is something that you need to pay attention to, especially when it comes to your child, your children. They need to be supervised. You as an adult have to supervise yourself. So most of the time around this time, the Easter season or Easter holiday, you will hear about drowning issues and so forth. How the person probably drowned? Well, probably the person have ate before swimming, and the person suffer a cramp, goes down into the water and did not resurface. Or simple again, person consuming alcoholic beverage goes into the water again, did not resurface because they suffer cramps. So those are some of the things that we want to highlight. In terms of the other aspect with crime prevention, personal safety, minimize the amount of jewelry that you use on a regular basis. When walking on the street, you want to be focused. Right? If you're going to the store, of course, you want to minimize the amount of items you would want to use in your bag, especially the cash, raw cash. You want to use probably an ATM card or a credit card or something like that, because these are things that attracts criminals. Right? So personal safety is very important. And of course, using the Facebook again. There is no need for you to be saying that you're going out for the vacation. Yes, you want to publicize, I think, or tell somebody you're excited about this, going to this trip in Cancun and Mexico and what have you. But at the end of the day, look at your home, right? You have to secure your home as well.
But you'd be suggesting then that your friends would be breaking into your house?
Well, I wouldn't say your friends, but then remember someone knows another person. And the Facebook is something that is commonly used nowadays. And people actually follow your Facebook page. So most of the time, I mean, there is not really good statistics to indicate that that is such. But come on, if you're in the rural area and you put up things like that, you have people looking at those things. And remember, we're talking about starting with Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, Easter Monday, so it's a long holiday.
Do we see an increase in burglaries around Easter break?
Sometimes it goes up around Easter break, but I know for a fact that because we have been sensitizing the public through community policing with the handouts and so forth, it has been at a minimal, right? But nonetheless, we cannot drop our guard, right? You need to be cautious as much as possible. It is something quite disheartening when you know for a fact you have to get up 5 o'clock in the morning, especially if you're living in the rural area, just to come to work or go to work. You purchase your items and everything, your hard-working money, and somebody breaks into your home and just take away those items. So we ask people to be cautious with that.
Is it also helpful to us, because a lot of people will be traveling out to Placencia, to destinations outside of Belize, to the Keys. Is it helpful to us, a family member who's staying in the city or a friend, to go and check on your house, to leave the keys?
Certainly we encourage that, but we have to be careful again. You see, everything we do, we have to be conscious. We need to probably do a good vetting of that individual so that that person can give you feedback. My neighbor just recently put in cameras. Cameras do help. It have the criminal think twice, right? So we encourage that you inform a person you can trust to go and check on your residence. In the Placencia area, again, we will see a lot of people convene there, Kikaka, St. Bite Hopkins, along the coast. If you have a business place as such, that you have a swimming pool, we encourage that the business operators get a lifeguard so that we can probably prevent any kind of situations from happening. We had a recent one, you know, didn't want to, that happened, but unfortunately it did. And it goes to show a little bit of responsibility on your part as well. You cannot be too reckless as such, for lack of a better word, but you want to take precautions as much as possible. There most of the time when we go to Placencia, you have these people, or as a family-oriented setting, sit down and convene with a conversation. The conversation gets healthy and it's interesting. So you have the children left vulnerable. So you need to supervise those children. And if they're using any, the life vest, the lifeguard, we encourage things like that. Especially those who are traveling to the Keys. I know that Port Authority will be out there, definitely. And they will encourage it discourage the overcrowdedness of the vessels. Right? So these are things that the police department were looking at.
I appreciate you talking about the social media posts, because I think people don't always recognize the risks that they take when they disclose their location all the time. Because there's this really, there's a safety video I've seen where someone says, oh, traveling for the weekend, and then it goes, the thief likes it. Well, because you know that the house may be empty. Now, so that's one of the things that you mentioned, but let's talk about alcohol consumption, because this is one of the crucial issues that we battle around this time, and it can lead to many problems. So let's start there.
Regardless of the prices being increased on alcohol, we still find out that a number of Belizeans like to consume alcohol for fun. Being it is for fun or social activity, whatever the case may be, we want to encourage people, especially going to the business establishment, the bars and so forth, that if you're going to consume alcoholic beverage, let that person open that bottle in your presence. And don't leave your bottle idling around, saying that you're going to the restroom, please mind this, take care of this, this bottle for me. No, because somebody can easily put a pill in there and then you know, and then rob that individual.
Happen in Belize, right? Because sometimes people say, oh no, that happens in other parts of the world, but
there's a serious possibility that it can happen, and like I mentioned, we should never drop our guard, because we're open to anything to happen to us. Again, looking at alcohol, we have noticed that probably there's an increase, with traffic accidents. So we go to the normal routine, don't drink and drive, and if you're drinking, get a designated driver, you know, things like that. And of course, we'll be out there with doing checkpoints. And I ask that residents be patient with us when we're doing our checkpoint exercise. We encourage buckle up. You have a children sitting to the back, that person has to be properly buckled in. And then, of course, the normal routine, Your vehicle has to be properly insured. The vehicle has to be properly licensed. Our lights should be working on the vehicle, especially when it comes to the brake lights and so forth. And of course, we have to make sure that you yourself is a license holder for that vehicle.
Yeah.
Right? But alcohol is something that a lot of people will be consuming. And we want to look at the Liquor Licensing Act when it comes to the alcoholic beverage.
Now, Good Friday is a dry day in Belize. You're not allowed to sell alcohol.
You're not allowed.
Let's revise those regulations, and that includes the tourist destination. Yes,
it does, and I was going to emphasize on that. We're talking about Kikaka, we're talking about San Pedro and other places. The law is the law is the law. Good Friday, we're not supposed to be having those, the alcohol being sold from 6 in the morning, 6 in the evening, thereabout. Officers will be out there looking at public drinking, right? For places where you have consumption off the premises, it is strictly off the premises and so, right? If it is on the premises, then we ask the operators, the vendors and so forth, not to encourage people to get all the way into that well over drunk or drunk itself, because that itself can breed another situation to occur. Yes, you're looking at getting the finance, but you're also looking at the person's safety as well.
Absolutely.
Because if that person is alone driving the vehicle, probably that person may went through a domestic situation or some kind of personal problem, consume alcoholic, and then
I think that's one of the things that we don't always link together as well. The bar brawls that take place, the shootings that take place after being at a nightclub where drinking is usually happening, or the chopping or stabbing or whatever major crime. And so often these things escalate over something minor. I mean, we've heard fights and stabbings taking place because somebody stepped on somebody's foot, but they were drunk.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those are some of the issues that we want to really highlight as a department, because one of the things that we spoke about, and yesterday we had a quick meeting with my new officer commanding operations, Mr. Chester Williams. Community policing falls under his portfolio. So we spoke about minor issues, the smallest issues. You might just take a bottle and hurl at an individual. That is something that can escalate. Taking a firearm and shoot it in the public just like that, and then you believe that no harm is done, but look at the situation at KHMA. These are things that are
or one of the minor issues that people very rarely report is you are not allowed to be inebriated and have a gun, whether it's licensed or not.
That's right. That's right.
You're not allowed to touch it and threaten someone, expose it.
And that is one of the things that we want to highlight when it comes to the firearm itself. You know you're a license holder for a firearm. It is your duty to safeguard that firearm. Whether it is in a safe or a safe compartment area, that is your duty and responsibility. So there is absolutely no excuse for you not to have that firearm safe in a safe area and then leave for a vacation as such. You know what you have to do. If you know that your home is not secured as such, we ask that you turn it into the police department, and then we take it over from you, give you a triplicate receipt and so forth, so that you can go on a vacation, return back, pick up your firearm, and then off you go to your normal place of abode.
You know, I'd like to swing the conversation a bit though. At this time, in my opinion, there is a low trust for the police department. We have to accept that. What it is that the police have put in place in terms of supervision, because I think that one of the huge problems with the police department is supervision. What has the police department put in place? Because there's going to be high traffic at the police stations this Easter. Drunken behavior, people who are complaining, burglaries. And so there has to be something in place to allow the public to feel safe. That I heard the new commander, Mr. Longsworth, say that we're going to have response time of about 3 to 5 minutes, which I think is commendable. But from the police standpoint, are the police ready, particularly I'm speaking about supervision, to make sure that it's delivering service? And I'm going to throw one other thing into this very loaded question. We're talking about drinking, and unfortunately, I know a lot of times police officers are stressed. And your friend passes, you're at the checkpoint, and one of your friends passes and says, "Hey, Officer James, shall you be here, man?" Officer takes it. 4 or 5 people pass, he's also drunk. So that goes back to my central question again as to what is in place in terms of supervision to allow these officers who are very stressed and are going through the same human losses and sense of missing out that we are, that they're doing their job and doing their job well.
Well, I can tell you this off the bat, that when it comes to the Operation ACT, Adjusting Crime Together, we started that off in October of last year. And we have taken a bit of pounding here and there. But we were able to go back to the drawing board and to see how best we can enhance it. And so we have developed another strategy with Operation ACT, which is still in existence, but we have relief commanders now operating from the Operation ACT. So that will answer some part of your question in terms of supervision. Okay. We do have a centralized commander who oversees that. And this is a methodology that was that came out from Mr. Chester Williams as well. He was able to modify that. We met in Belize City at the Raccoon Street. And we're looking at corporals and sergeants. They were set in place to assist the commanders in supervising the persons or officers on the grounds. We have an operational ACT blog that all officers who are on the operations are able to give an update of what they're doing in terms of the crime prevention and patrolling duties within the city itself. We definitely look at what Mr. Gillett had mentioned in terms of the response time, and that is what we're doing. Gone are the days of officers rushing to one scene, leaving their other areas of responsibility vulnerable. We centralize and we make sure that once you're assigned to this specific area for you to conduct your patrols, then you are responsible for that area. Yeah. And if it is that something happened, then you have to answer to the officer in charge as to why it happens. Because most of the time, the citizenry don't see the internal part of what the police department is doing. And they shouldn't at some extent, because we shouldn't have...
It's internal.
Yes, of course. You shouldn't have all those things out there. But it is something that we're looking at now, and we're streamlining those things to put things in one aspect. Another part of the question would talk about the alcohol.
So it's a very long question.
Yeah. The alcohol. There are times when police officers will get something from the person who approaches the checkpoint. We try not to encourage citizens to do that, right? Because then at the end of the day, it speaks bad for as a department. The person might just, out of good faith,
friendship,
sir, you want a beverage or something to. I encounter that myself, but I just look at who I am getting it from and things like that, because you don't want to really encourage your officers to do that. Yeah. But I mean, some people would offer a beverage like a soda, and then if you don't take it, they feel bad. So it is just judgment as to how you handle that situation.
But obviously, if it's a beer, you turn it down.
Of course. It shouldn't, because we don't allow things like that to happen within our department. I mean, every half an hour, an officer is to give a SITREP, a situational report based on their location that they're posted. Let me
ask you a question. There are several checkpoints in Belize City.
Yes.
Many times you pass them and the police officers are simply sitting somewhere in the shade, God bless them, because it's hot.
Yeah.
Yes.
totally unengaged from the checkpoint. Sometimes you stop at the checkpoint, you look around for a police officer, there's nobody there. Why is this the case? And I mean, there are two things here that I can assume. One, either they're set up and unmanned, or two, those who are manning the post have nobody supervising to ensure that they're doing their work.
Those are some serious issues affecting us as a department.
But it's fairly blatant too. I mean, we could talk about areas a block away from the police station, and I can pass 3 times in the span of a half an hour, and I will see the same.
You know what we normally tell our officers? It is self-interest. If you're posted to work at a specific area, that is their area of responsibility. Some people may complain and say, you know what, it is a 12-hour shift. Some people are saying, you know what, I work a double shift last night. Some people will say all sorts of factors. Whether it is true or not, what we train at the training academy is for you to man your posts and be alert at all times. But like what you mentioned earlier, we're human beings. But I'm not finding an excuse for this situation. I am just simply saying that these are things that happen and we don't turn a blind eye to it. We stay focused on it and try to address it as much as possible. But it has to be that individual effort, that passion to actually run that base.
Officer, there's another issue, and that's why my questions to you are all lined towards supervision.
Yes.
Because there's another elephant in the room, and it has an M16. We've seen recently the policymakers decide that in order to muscle out a raging crime problem in Belize City, that we have brought in soldiers. My experience is that sometimes the officers become tired. You know, they're out there 12 hours, imagine. They sit, and sometimes the soldiers start to ask you for your license, your insurance. Is there anything in place additionally to deal with making sure that the police do their job and the auxiliary support from these soldiers, that line is not crossed? Because soldiers do not have the same legal authority as police officers.
Certainly. And to answer that, we have what we call a briefing before you start your tour of duty, and this includes the entire soldiers as well as members of the police department. What the soldiers do for us is for us to cover more grounds in terms of foot patrols and static patrols. But like what you mentioned, they have no authority as such to ask you any questions of anything as it relates to police work. Right. But the police officers, and that's why we implore on our officers, that they are the law enforcement officers, and the BDF are out there to only support the entire patrolling duties. So if you as a resident come across something like that, you can bring it up to our attention, and then we can see how best we can address it. Because these are things that infringes on persons' constitutional rights. And remember now, we're still a law-abiding country and things like that, and we want everyone to be safe. If you have a complaint, we want to deal with that complaint, because these are experiences that we want to deal with and then come to a closure with it.
Yeah. Can I do one final negative thing? Yes. Because I know that you came this morning to really give us some pointers in terms of safety precautions. But we're dealing with a human element of police officers out there. A police officer is out there, I'm talking about a constable. Yes. He sees money passing up and down. You know, at the Chinese shop, you're buying drinks. You fill up your car, you have an ice box, you know, you're going to Placencia. And the temptation, I think, at this point in time, to hustle, to get somebody, because there's never everything perfect with someone. You said you forgot your driver's license, maybe your seatbelt isn't. Is there anything in place, again, to deal with the possibility of officers who might want the temptation to say, listen, I want to take one, leave $50 because you know, I didn't like your seatbelt or something like that?
I know for a fact that the professional standard branch will, well, there's a strategy in place to have a professional standard branch officer be assigned across the country.
Oh.
But
Nice.
it goes back to the same that we talk about supervision. It's not that we're dogging out our police officers, but it is supervision. And we can only as so much inform them that those things are wrong. That is the wrong approach that we want to have. So we don't encourage our officers to receive any.
They're not allowed to.
They are not
it's not
allowed to.
They're not allowed to. Yeah,
right?
it's illegal.
And it is illegal.
Yes.
But some people, like I said, generously enough, would want to take out that cash, and then you have the cameras around, and then that may receive differently. That probably I'm a friend of yours and I just want to give you a $50, but then the camera is there and you're a civilian dressed in a civilian outfit, and then I'm the police officer that receives that I'm getting bribery, receiving your bribe, right? But we don't allow that, and it shouldn't happen.
Yeah,
right?
and you can report it.
Definitely you should
report it. There was that great case in Punta Gorda where the teacher left the checkpoint and reported it immediately. And the officers were charged.
Yes.
I want to come back to a very important issue, and I know it's relevant given what we saw over the weekend, but it's also relevant at Easter, because in previous Easter breaks, we've seen this issue. When police responds to an issue in a crowded space, crowd control is important.
That's right.
Approach is important.
That's
we
right.
remember that Key Cocker incident where the person was being dragged on the beach, and everybody on looking who felt it was unfair and unjustified intervened. Talk to us about what we as civilians can do when we genuinely feel, because there are, I always say, there are good officers in this country, but it doesn't mean that there aren't a few who won't follow the right protocol. If I, as a civilian, witness a fight taking place, police is called, and the approach that they take, in my mind, I don't know the full regulation and the rules of engagement. In my mind, it seems way too aggressive. What can I do? What should I do?
Well, what you should do is to just make sure as much as possible, observe the situation. I say observe the situation and report it.
Yes.
The reason why I say that is because, one, you mentioned that you probably don't know what happened, but you're seeing some unfair, unjust situation occurring in front of you. It is only human that we would want to react.
Yes.
But remember now that when you react, that can go into another stage of something else to occur. What we would encourage, and this all goes to the police department part of it, you mentioned about approaching crowds and so forth. They have their operational methodologies, the way they strategize as the way how they should approach a situation. Yeah. They are trained in that area, especially when it comes to the operational element of the police department. But for you to actually get involved in that situation, it is like a no-no, because then at the end of the day, you can only get hurt. Because we're looking at a police officer who is trying to subdue an individual or arrest an individual or apprehend an individual. And here you come now, your intention is to do good. But the officer at that time, yes, is going through this situation. It might only escalate situation to get worse. So what I encourage is for you to report it. We'll get all the facts, all the details.
Use your cell phone.
Use a cell phone if you have to. Report the situation, and then we move on from there. Yeah. But you actually being a part of it, it is not something that we would encourage.
Let's push this further, because I think we've seen this in many different ways. We saw it with the avocado situation. We saw it with but this is not the first time. I don't want people to think these are two isolated incidents. In the past we've seen others.
Yes.
But we don't always put the full context in mind. One, the onlookers are oftentimes inebriated as well. Maybe not the market, but in like an Easter situation or a concert or a public event. What can we expect what should we expect from a police officer coming in to subdue a person? How much force is allowed? What is the right approach? Because if I see somebody coming rough and tough, automatically I'll say, whoa, that doesn't seem, somehow as a human being and thinking of human rights, it doesn't seem right. But I don't know the rules of engagement from the police department. How much force is necessary?
Minimum force as necessarily possible. Why I say that? Because we have what we call the justifiable force and harm. The first rules of engagement is for you to approach the individual in a civilized, professional, calm manner, for you for that person to understand why you are there as a police officer. Sir, I observe you doing X, Y, and Z. This is not proper when it comes to the rules or the laws and so forth. You need to explain certain things, and we have been taught those things. But what happened is that I am noticing that because of a little bit of tension and spectators around, it goes back to the human part of it. And probably the police officer doesn't want to look bad in public, but he's there to do a job. And his job is to quell the breach of peace.
Not create more.
Not create more as such. But the thing is that we need to understand is that onlookers are people who support incidents like that, right? Yes, you're shouting at the officer. You're to chance, like what we saw recently. We're not here to defend the police because we did some areas as well too. But things like this, we need to understand that when it comes to the approach has to be that of a professional.
Let me add on something extra to this, because this is one that concerns me as well. When is an officer allowed to pull his weapon at a person? Not necessarily shoot. We know that's a whole other ball game. But we've seen videos where people, the onlookers, start getting a little bit antsy, so there's a bit of a struggle. It really just creates more chaos. But we see officers who then pull their guns, sometimes crank it, or even point it at the civilian. What is allowed in that situation?
The circumstances will dictate the pace. Why I say that is because these officers have been trained in terms of the operational aspect, in rules of engagement. The firearm should be the last thing that you would ever want to use in any circumstance. The rules, you must approach the individual first. You must talk to the person first. If that doesn't work, then you have to find another strategy for you to actually apprehend that individual. But I am simply saying that the firearm should be the last thing that you ever want to use whilst you're doing any rules of engagement, right? But that only comes when you have criminal force, that you actually saw somebody getting injured and shot by an individual. Probably you would have to resort. Or
you believe they're armed.
Or you believe them armed, but because you have seen certain things and the person have made certain move or advancement to you, right? Because that person is the aggressor and then that person aggresses you.
Let me flip it on the other side now, because it doesn't mean spectators are completely blameless in the situation.
Exactly. Very good.
There is a thing called obstruction of justice
Very
as
good.
well.
Very good.
So let's talk about unresisting arrest. So let's talk about the responsibility of the persons who the police are attempting to apprehend and what they can do to ensure personal safety and also not create chaos, and also spectators. We said use your cameras, but also you don't want to jump in between the police and the person being arrested.
I noticed that there's a lot of people who like to practice things like that, being that arrogant type of person, such. What we encourage is that, of course, obstruction of justice, and you're interfering a police officer's work. I've been hearing that they will say a lot of insulting words. You can't be charged for insulting a police officer. We're talking about assaulting an individual, assaulting a police officer, all these things.
Saying you'll kill somebody is also,
Yes. If you say that I'm going to meet you at the alley later on and probably certain things happen, you will be the first to actually, the police to actually go after, right? But these issues in terms of shouting at the police, you're a chancy police officer, you kill a woman and you do this. These are things that are allegations, but you're saying it to the individual because you're pointing at the police officer. Yeah. That officer can eventually take out a lawsuit for you is in some cases as well.
And what constitutes resisting arrest?
So much things can constitute resisting arrest. Where you have me as the brother, you as the sister, I don't want the police officer to arrest you, so I just intervene. Or we just don't want them to take the individual, like what we have actually saw over the weekend. Because there was this guy who the police grabbed hold of, and there's this mass amount of people who convene on that stage.
But I want to push Marlene's question a little bit further, as she flipped it, which I think is very important. People tend to come towards where you see these altercations, and I think that people don't understand that when you have firearms involved, when you shoot that firearm, you have ricochets. A bullet doesn't just go from point A to point B.
Or even up in the air.
You know, or up in the air, it comes back down. And I think it's an issue of trust, and I don't think that trust will be healed. And it's a matter of abuse too, because if people know that they can get away with calling police abuse when they're doing something wrong, in these high tension, they will use it. But I think there's also a responsibility for them to know individually that I saw a video of where you had civilians coming into the yard, you know, running in.
Yeah.
And I thought, if one of those M16, these are semi-automatic rifles, and if I know my guns right, you pull that trigger, it goes.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that I would want to have mentioned, that you don't know what you're going to get yourself into if you convene in a situation like that, where a police officer has this firearm and things like that happened.
So if you're in a public event and you see the police trying to apprehend someone, I would think that you'd want to move away.
Stand fast and move away from the situation. Let the police do their job. Because if the police is there to do their job, right? And we don't want to have interference, right?
Now, very clearly, let's take this into a larger scope. We spoke of the police responsibility. We spoke of our responsibilities as civilians. It is a dual effort. But I think if we are to be fair, what is happening is that there is a mistrust. I think civilians respond oftentimes outside of what they're allowed to do because they have an expectation of abuse or brutality to take place or unfair treatment. And it speaks to your particular portfolio, which is community policing. And I want you to tell me this. Your job, I imagine, has probably only gotten harder with how things have been unfolding in the city. How do you help communities to remember or to be educated sometimes for the first time that police officers are community workers?
You know, I don't know really if this is like a coincidence as such, but just like yesterday we met and we're trying to see how best we can instill back the public trust. One of the things that we mentioned about, and that is the only answer to this situation, is that of community policing. And the 9 o'clock this morning, I'll be meeting with most of my officers as well for countrywide. And we are going to talk about the policies to see how best we can re-strategize those policies. We're in the final stage of it, where the gang resistance education and training program is concerned, where the National Police Youth Cadet Corps is concerned. You have the elderly shutting, you have the other programs that we're doing, the Do the Right Thing programs. But most importantly, if you noticed last week, we started back with the meet and greet. Yes. Because we need to find out what is happening on the grounds. And these concerns that we have, Mr. Williams is strict about it. We need to table them and see how best we can address them. So that is one of our addressing situation to this problem, community policing.
Let me ask another question. Since Sunday, has any police entity re-entered, specifically community policing, re-entered the very same neighborhood where we saw this chaos to perhaps attempt to mend the relationship or start to mend the relationship?
Well, today we'll be seeing some officers going into that area. You have to be careful as to how a situation unfolds. You don't really want to send your officers almost immediately because of the tension. Some people may say, okay, it is time for us to go in there when the tension is still high. But you will receive certain threats already, and you will probably just compound the situation to be worse. Okay. So we'll actually wait a bit more, and then we just find a time for us to do it. It is like doing the SARA method. You scan, you analyze the response, and then you assess the situation. Well, assess the situation. Well,
ASB Jones, we're out of time, and we appreciate the tips that you have shared with us this morning.
Very interesting.
And we really went, and I think we hope people remember the earlier conversation with the Easter tips for safety. But of course, it was very important for us to understand what's happening in terms of what our responsibilities as the community, what those responsibilities are, and also by police officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
And best of luck. We know police officers don't necessarily get an Easter break, so best of luck over the holidays.
All right.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, if your dream has been acting, you definitely want to tune in. It's time to talk about an upcoming casting call, so stay tuned.